as a model that could be used to resolve the Kashmir conflict. So for the first time, I think we will see in Pakistan not just lip service being paid to the cause of the Kashmiris, and the lip service only being paid to the human rights violations being done by the occupation forces of India and occupied Kashmir, but we will actually have a blueprint of something to go on and how we can move forward on the issue of Kashmir. Then we need to also simultaneously move for a strategic dialogue with India on nuclear-related issues. We have tried this before. We've given many suggestions to India before 1998. We talked about nuclear weapon-free zones. We suggested to them a zero-missile regime. Then we suggested to the Indians that, okay, let's not deploy, they shouldn't deploy the Agni. We suggested different nuclear restraint regimes. Nothing really worked. The only thing the Indians and Pakistanis agreed to, or the only thing that India had agreed to, was that they would they'd notify each other of the ballistic missile tests that they would do. They'd first inform and then they would do the test. But I think we need to move beyond that. At the end of the day, neither Pakistan nor India has unlimited economic resources. We need to come to the dialogue table to discuss strategic agreements on and number crunching on how, where, what missiles will be deployed, taking into consideration the China factor for India. But there has to be some balance and parity that the two sides have to agree to. Otherwise, the way that India is on the spiraling arms acquisition route, we are going to be heading for disaster. We want peace so that people can develop. Our people can have development in this area. And for that, you need cooperation. It can't happen unilaterally because of our historical experience with India. We have had wars with India. We are seeing threats presently from India along our borders and, of course, the line of control. So we need to have a strategic dialogue with India on nuclear issues. And on the table, yes, we should have the Nasser on the table, and we should have India's ABM systems on the table also. We should have the Agni missile on the table as well. So these are, I think it's time that we evolve a proper blueprint of what we expect to discuss, or what we expect the two sides to discuss in terms of a nuclear strategic dialogue. But to be able to make a nuclear strategic dialogue and a nuclear strategic balance work, there is a third thing that we have to move towards, and that is conventional force reductions. It is something I have been saying for a long time, that along with nuclear issues, you can't de-link them totally from conventional forces, and Pakistan and India have to dialogue on reduction of conventional forces. Something on the Paris Treaty model is what I have been suggesting, because if you look at India's aggressive or military systems, they are all aimed at Pakistan. They are deployed against Pakistan. The China factor actually doesn't come into it at all. So in terms of conventional forces, the China factor doesn't play a very important role. But Pakistan and India need to move towards some sort of agreement and reduction of these conventional forces if we are going to eventually move towards having security for all our people, and eventually as we move towards conflict resolution, and I'm convinced we will eventually, of having peace and development in this region. The fourth thing I want to suggest, and where do we go from now, is why not a regional CTBT? Bring in China into it as well. Till the CTBT at the global level, whenever the US Senate decides to act rationally and pass the CTBT, a regional CTBT benefits both Pakistan and India. Pakistan, I want to remind people, declared a unilateral moratorium on nuclear testing. But at some stage, unless India also agrees to that, Pakistan cannot be expected to unilaterally sustain that moratorium, although of course the international presumption against nuclear testing is so strong, it would be difficult for even India to do a nuclear test right now. Another way forward, much is made of the NPT, maybe it's time to repair the NPT, and this is another thing I've been suggesting for a long time. Have an additional protocol on safeguards with the NPT. Why not an additional protocol which accepts Pakistan and India as nuclear weapon states, party to the NPT? You have to do that if you want Pakistan and India to accept the responsibilities of nuclear weapon states. Then they must be accepted de jure as nuclear weapon states, and it can be done. So maybe at the next meeting of the of the NPT, somebody should come up with a suggestion. You want Pakistan and India to behave as nuclear responsible powers and take on the responsibilities like the other P5 have done, although I don't know with the Americans now advocating the use of tactical weapons where the responsibility factor comes from them. But anyhow, so this is another thing we can do. Two other things. Well, one other thing actually. You will not help nuclear deterrence or nuclear stability in South Asia by giving preferential treatment to India in supplier cartels like the nuclear suppliers do. Let's be very clear. If you want stability genuinely in this region, if you want lowering of the nuclear ante in this region, if you want nuclear weapons not to be raised to higher levels in this region, then you must apply a criteria-based approach in the nuclear suppliers group, not a country-specific approach. That is the only way forward if you want genuine balance and stability. I'm not sure whether that is the aim of the present global powers, but certainly for Pakistan, the NSG membership becomes extremely critical, because if India gets membership, then Pakistan will have permanent technology denial, because NSG decisions are based on consensus. So let there be no doubt in Pakistan that the NSG, we need to have more active diplomacy. We rely too heavily on China. We put too much of a burden on China. We need to be having effective diplomacy, which we are not seeing on the NSG, because India has a terrible track record on proliferation. We may have had the AQ network, which, by the way, AQ broke no international laws that Pakistan had signed, no international treaties. But India as a state has proliferated, whether it was a nuclear agreement with the Saddam government, whether it was Indian scientists working in other countries, and whether India was buying clandestine material. So we need to publicize that record to the international community. So far we have done almost zero in NSG diplomacy. Let me finally end that we are not, I have to disagree with Subrata on this. We are not one people. Some parts of Pakistan may have some cultural affiliations within maybe northern India, but I'm a Baloch. I have nothing in common with what is now India. I may have some cultural affiliations with the Iranian Balochistan. Pashtuns have more in common with people in Afghanistan. So we are not one people, but yes, we have one destiny, because we are neighbors and we need peace. We have people who are poverty-stricken. We need peace, and for peace to come, we have to work together. And we can only work together through dialogue, not through the assertion of military might. Where India is playing a game of brinkmanship. When you're a nuclear power, you should not indulge in games of brinkmanship, because you cannot control them. We have to move away from zero-sum games to positive-sum games. And that, at the end of the day, is what is going to be important. And finally, I think at the end of the day, if we are talking about nuclear cooperation and nuclear-related issues, we have to bring Israel into the equation. Israel cannot be left out as if nobody can discuss Israel's nuclear program. It cannot be a taboo subject. It has to be placed on the table when you're discussing nuclear issues. Thank you.
I'm quite tempted to say, how the hell do I give you the crux that my takeaways from this particular presentation? But I think what is important is where she ends this rather provocative presentation, that whatever be the differences, there's a common destiny that needs peace, and the solution would walk through a dialogue table. You need to be strong, you need to deter through having potent survivable weapons, including nuclear weapons, but end of the day, the dialogue is what is required. Now, I am sensitive to this that Dr. Mazari made some very bold statements. We expect and hope that Prime Minister Narendra Modi also goes equally bold and decides whether he only wants to look at his domestic next elections or does he want actually peace in this region. With this rather interesting situation, I open now to a Q&A session. We have, if the organizers permit, about 30 minutes. We could do that. So perhaps two sets of questions. We will take sets of questions. Please identify yourself and your institutional affiliation, and try to refrain from comments. Prefer questions as we go along. Let me start from here. Bruno, you can be the first one. I have 3 hands down there. We will go in this order, take these 4, and then we look around for more.
Hi, this is Bruno Tertreff from the Foundation for Strategic Research in France. 2 very good questions. First, to all speakers. You've spoken at length about one component of strategic stability, which is arms race stability. You have not spoken so much about the survivability, the secure, assured second strike capability in India and Pakistan. How much do you think it's necessary as compared to other theaters? How much do you think India have achieved and Pakistan have achieved in that regard? Second question, Dr. Mazari, your clarification on so-called tactical nuclear weapons, quote unquote, is very much welcome. However, and this is a comment disguised as a question, if I may, I think any time a Pakistani speaker talks about tactical nuclear weapons, even with your clarification, it induces people frowning, challenging, fearing. It induces concern. So my question is, why do you need to talk about tactical? Why can't you say, as other nuclear weapon states have said, some others, 2 or 3 of them, all nuclear weapons are strategic. Don't talk about tactical. Anytime you talk about tactical, it's a comment disguised as a question, disguised as a comment. And I hope you see my point there. Thank you.
Yeah, let me go in this order. The 2 gentlemen at the back first, and then we go to...
From Kashmir, and plus I'm the member of United Nations Policy Strategy Group on Human Rights and Sustainable Development Goals. First of all, I would like to make a small comment on Madam Mazari's statement about Kashmir. I really appreciate the new government's policy and thinking and approach towards Kashmir. So my question is, like, as Kashmir is the most marginalized, highly militarized and longest conflict zone on this world, so it's between 3 nuclear states. Now China is more interested in CPAC and Gilgit-Baltistan as being part of Kashmir conflict. Gilgit-Baltistan is a gateway of CPAC. Now my question is, like, if we look on the human rights violations in Indian-held Kashmir, now India became the member of Human Rights Council at the same forum at the United Nations. So what's the relationship between the nuclear warfare? What we believe is, if there is a nuclear warfare in this region, the Kashmir will be the main cause behind that. So what's our strategy, or what's our government, or think tank, or academia is thinking to cope out the situation? On the one side, India is a member of Human Rights Council. On the other hand, Human Rights Commissioner report says India is violating the basic human rights. And what's the nuclear consequences of all this aspect? Thank you very much.
This is Ahmed Khan from National Defense University. As Dr. Subhadra talked about S-400 missile acquisition by India, the question arises here, China also acquired the same kind of missile from Russia. So the question arises here, what was the Indian response to the Chinese acquisition of S-400? Likewise, there was reports on Russian media that it may be coincident of timing that Pakistan tested Hori missile in response to the Russian Indian acquisition of S-400. So the question to both of Dr. Mazari and Sir Banori to respond that what would be the Pakistan response to S-400 acquired by India? Thank you.
And we've admired the way you put across your point of view quite straightforwardly. But why not our Foreign Office? Why is there always been docility, on the part of our Foreign Office and people, those who represent us in Vienna or in NSG meetings and other? I mean, it is absolutely sickening to see that the Indians, be that on CNN or in other channels, even the academia, they are so forthright, they're so, they defend their country so well. Whereas our diplomats, they just don't, face up to the Americans or the Westerns as they're, propping up India as the darling of this region. And the second specific question, you talked about SPD waking up to the challenge from India. With BrahMos having a speed of 3,700 kilometers an hour, we hardly will get a few minutes to respond. Isn't it high time that rather than pleasing Americans by not deploying our warheads, we should deploy at least some of them so that we can at least fire them on India in case there is a surprise attack?
Sure, I think every United States wants to maintain a secure second strike capability. The problem is how to define and measure secure. It's exactly because countries feel their second strike capability is no longer secure that we see great incentives to incorporate new technologies to enhance their nuclear survivability, right? To put nuclear warheads on long-range nuclear-powered cruise missiles in order to circumvent missile defense, etc., etc. And that's, I think, very destabilizing. So it's a great question that we need to try to address, or at least mitigate. What I'm trying to say is the traditional model of mutually assured destruction, using force exchange models and calculations to calculate whether your nuclear weapons are survivable, whether you can launch a credible second strike, is increasingly untenable. Because now, as I said, missile defense, conventional weapons, even cyber can threaten your nuclear weapons. How can you quantify the threat from all these new non-nuclear technologies to your nuclear weapons? Even one of these technologies, missile defense, if you look at the China-US example, they can have fundamental and deep and real disagreement on the impact of one missile defense systems, the STAT, Terminal High Altitude Missile Defense, deployed by the United States in South Korea. They can have major disagreements about the impact of one missile defense radar. And imagine what's the challenge of having basic agreement about the overall impact of all US missile defense system on China's nuclear deterrent, then for US to agree how much more nuclear weapons China should justifiably build in order to compensate that loss. So that model, that math framework is increasingly unsustainable. That was what I'm trying to say, and we really need to stop basing our planning, military planning on making such calculations.
Thank you. Dr. Mazari, do you want to give your response?
Couple of responses. Second strike capability, I talked in general terms. Of course, it's absolutely essential for Pakistan. If our deterrence is going to be credible, then we have to completely acquire survivability of our nuclear weapons. And actually now we are in that phase where we can. Of course, India's deployment of ABM will also mean that we will have to overall increase our the number of nuclear weapons and missiles that we have. I want to, on tactical nuclear weapons, I was countering because the world is where the American nuclear commentators and experts and analysts have been targeting Pakistan by saying that the Nasr is a battlefield weapon. So in response to that, I am saying it is not a battlefield weapon. It's a tactical weapon, although now with the Trump administration actually advocating battlefield weapons, I guess they should be out of the mode of getting hysterical about the Nasr, which is a tactical weapon. So that's the reason why I refer